and we're sitting on the bank, just kind of doing this sort of post fish, chit chat. And I look over and there's a tear running down Dave McCoy's face. And Dave's a really emotional guy. He's just a wonderful guy, huge on conservation. And I'm like, dude, are you okay? And he's like, this is a really special fish. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to fish for these fish again, right? Because it had been closed. And he's like, this gives me hope.
That was Peter Vandergrift sharing a powerful steelhead fishing story today. This story and choosing a new fly reel today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
Hey, how's it going today? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. I'm curious if you've heard of the new Clubhouse social media app, the hottest thing out there right now. It's still in beta mode, and actually it's only for iPhone users for the next few months, but it's going to be released soon to everyone. And if you are on iPhone, you want to check it out, I'm at Dave C. Stewart, and you can DM me if you want to get an invite. It's kind of on invite only, so I can connect with you there. Just touch base on Instagram or anywhere else. Peter Vandergrift from Cheeky Fishing is here to share some tips on choosing a fly reel. We also hear about the background on Cheeky, who his biggest influence was at Sims. We get a feel for a few tips like how to tighten your drag, and this amazing story about a trip as a 16-year-old to Alaska with his parents' purple van. Definitely don't want to miss that one today. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsors. Sawyer offers a full line of modern and traditional products for oarsmen, canoeists, kayakers, and paddlers from all genres, providing unsurpassed function, performance, and beauty. The Sawyer Artisan Oar is their very popular square top oar with carbon fiber X-weave fiberglass shaft reinforcement, featuring prints of fish species from artists around the country, passionate about fisheries and fishing art. These oars showcase Sawyer's and the artist's ability to create rugged yet highly functional art. Head over to wetflyswing.com/Sawyer to grab your set today. I'm also happy to share another great sponsor we have with us this year. OPST's rods represent decades of dedication to sustained anchor two-handed casting. A rod reflects its designer, and these rods are a true illustration of Skagit master Ed Ward's vision. The Micro Series from 3 to 5 weight comes exceptionally close to single-handed specs and is proving to be a unique tool for trout and smallmouth anglers. Head over to wetflyswing.com/OPST to check out the lineup right now. That's wetflyswing.com/OPST. Without further ado, here is Peter Vandergrift from cheekyfishing.com. How's it going, Peter?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for coming on here. We were having a fun little chat off air here about some of the marketing stuff. So we're not going to dig into that because we're going to focus on fly fishing here. But I did want to talk. I think the marketing is interesting because you came over from some huge companies, Costa, and your history, and you came into Cheeky, which I think most people know about Cheeky, but it seems like it's maybe a brand that's been growing, right? Maybe it's not at the top tier like some of these other humongous fly fishing companies. But before we get into all that, and also we're going to dig into kind of choosing a reel, tell me how you first got into fly fishing.
Well, I mean, that's a long story. I don't know if we have enough time, but I guess the thing, I've always fly fished. And you say, how could you have always fly fished? So I never learned to spin fish. I learned to fly fish from my grandfather, who was a metallurgist and, a creel style fly fisherman. But, he taught us all at a young age to fly cast. And, so at the age of 4 and 5, I was, out there probably damaging his fiberglass rods. These were this was the age of the huge bend in a rod. Oh, yeah. But so I had learned from a young age. I loved it. I mean, I took to it right away. And, by the time I was, 10, 12 years old, I was the one cousin out of many, many that was sort of picked to go with my grandfather and his fishing buddies to the hills of Appalachia in Virginia and chase wild trout on the opener. And so I really kind of always loved it, and it was always a part of my life. This was my mom's dad, and my grandfather was my mom's dad. And so, I just kept fishing and fishing and fishing. And, I was sort of in high school, for example. Before I could drive, I would have my dad drop me off. We lived in Maryland at the time, and he would drop me off on the Gunpowder River in the morning on Saturday morning, and I would fish all day, and he would pick me up in the evening. So it kind of kept me, I wouldn't say it totally kept me away from parties, but it certainly was something that, as Friday nights wore on, I would be more apt to head home and get a good night's sleep so that I could get up and do some fishing. I always liked to adventure. When I was 16, my folks were, what would I say? They had an interesting way of teaching us responsibility. We didn't get we got what was called a paycheck. We didn't get an allowance. So every 2 weeks, my mom was a teacher. She was a math teacher. And every 2 weeks, she would give us a paycheck, and we had to pay for everything with it, which was, lunches at school, our clothes, any sort of outside activity we wanted to do. So it really taught us to save. And so I've always been kind of a big saver and don't like debt and all that kind of stuff. And the reason that this is, important is I really wanted to go to Alaska when I got my driver's license, and my parents didn't say no. They said, you can borrow the family vehicle, but you have to make X amount of dollars to pay for your own trip. So I got a job. I've had a job since I was really young, but I worked in the food industry. I was a dishwasher at the nice restaurant at the mall. So just imagine that. It was called Sir Walter Riley's, but I wouldn't even eat the fish there. Anyway, so I would, after school, I would go to the mall and do my homework in the food court and then go work until 11. And so I had this money. I said, "Hey, mom and dad, I have this money." And they said, "Gulp. Okay." And so anyway, so I drove to Alaska from Maryland. So a long ass drive, and spent the whole summer up there fishing and hiking. We did 18 days in the backcountry. And it was just a pretty amazing trip. And then again, when I graduated from high school, I hiked the Appalachian Trail from the North Mount Katahdin all the way down to Springer Mountain. It took me about 6 months. And I picked my school because of the fishing. I went to University of Montana. So all that, and in college, I was able to get a job as a fishing guide in Alaska. I worked for Dave Egdorf, Camille Egdorf's father. And Camille was young when I was up there. I mean, she was 5 years old and would come up to camp. And we had these rainbows that lived right in front of camp, and we would feed them food scraps. And literally, you would throw food out there, and they would come out and eat the scraps of food. And as the summer went on, they became gargantuan, and they became really picky. Right at first, they'd eat lettuce, anything you threw out to them, and then later they would only eat meat, so roast beef or whatnot. Anyway, so I guided up there, and then I kind of helped me pay for college. Guided in Missoula for a number of people, most prominently Blackfoot River Outfitters and John Herzer, who I'm still dear friends with to this day. And then we moved to Livingston, Montana, just north of Yellowstone National Park, and I got an outfitter's license and had my own little guide service there for a bit, called Got Trout Outfitters,
Nice.
Which was really fun. Play off of Got Milk, which was so I guess I'd always liked marketing. I didn't really know that.
That's right.
I also did some writing for the Livingston Enterprise, which was a daily newspaper there, and I'd done a lot of guiding. Ended up guiding for about 18 years, and this was coming to the end of it, and I was, it was beating up my body. I never had a summer with my wife,
Right.
and so she was sort of like, "Hey, you ever going to move on from this?" So, so I took this job at the newspaper, which I wrote 4 days a week, and then I guided 3 days. So 7 days a week I was working. They let me get my Friday story in on Thursday, and it was really interesting. I studied, creative writing in school, and had poked around at it, but I still remember like the first day, sit down, they show me my computer and the editing software they use, and they said, okay, we need 500 words about brucellosis, by the end of the day, because we're putting it in the newspaper tomorrow. I'm like, well, wait, what? Like, I think so many writers, especially coming out of school, are just sort of, you're in your own head a lot, and you just don't want to put you think you have to have everything perfect in order to put it out there. And this sort of weeded it out of me. And it was a really interesting job. It was actually one of the most interesting jobs I've ever had. But it didn't pay well at all.
Right.
So then I had noticed, I was reading the rival newspaper, the Bozeman Chronicle, which was much bigger, but we always, kind of looked at that as, what were they doing? And there was an ad in there for someone to manage and sort of recreate the guide program at Sims Fishing Products, which was over in Bozeman. And so my wife actually found it. She said, this sounds exactly like your skill set. And so I applied and had a really rigorous interview that took about 6 months. And they weeded through hundreds of people. And somehow they made we could call it maybe a foolhardy decision, but they ended up hiring me. And so that was sort of my entry into the industry side of things. And I worked at Sims for 4 years and learned so much there. And, there's still some great people that I worked with over there, most notably Diane Bristol, who, I worked for in the marketing department of 3 there, which was really fun. It's now much, much larger. But it was I was the third hire in the marketing department. And, she's just a really wonderful person in the industry, and still someone, I really believe in, kind of surrounding yourself with good people, and, really respecting the folks that have helped you get there. And so I'm still in close contact with a lot of those folks. And from there, I Al Perkinson, who was then at Costa, approached me about working for them. And so that was a step to a really large company and a little view outside of the world of fly fishing, even though I did focus on fly fishing and then later all freshwater fishing there, and really learned a lot about cause marketing and purpose-driven companies, and some of the bigger picture items that Costa was doing at the time. When I went there, we were doing things like, had started IndyFly and done the movies in Guyana, Jungle Fish, and, we're working with, I don't even remember, a country, like the largest country music star. I'm not a country music fan, as you can tell.
You mean Garth Brooks?
No, it wasn't Garth Brooks. It was the little guy.
Oh, what year was this?
Oh, geez. This would have been, I don't know, 8 years ago.
From now, 8 years from now. So yeah, I'm thinking too far back. I don't even know country music in the last.
Oh boy, how could I not remember this guy's name? Yeah. Anyway, it was like his tour, which was the largest tour on the planet, was sponsored by Costa and Budweiser.
That's crazy.
Right? So it was really interesting to see that big world marketing, but also in that big world marketing, that we were so focused on this kind of community aspect, and, just really going to the lengths of just being really, really connected. And was super proud of my work there, especially some of the work with Kick Plastic, getting water bottles. And that sort of changed my life, right? And just looking, once you sort of go down that road, Dave, of trying to understand your influence on the planet at a micro level, from buying a plastic bottle at the convenience store or bottled water, and how you can really start to make a difference there. I started to really, preach trying to kick plastic out of your, out of your work and out of your home life. And so sort of really proud of some of that work. And, then just this last year, Ted Upton, who started Cheeky Fishing and Wingo Outdoors, approached me about coming to work for him and really running marketing there. And, a lot of people are like, whoa, Pete, Sims and Costa, like, why would you go to such a small company? And I mean, that's the reason. It was small. There was a real chance to sort of hopefully bring some of the knowledge that I may or may not have learned
Yeah.
to a young brand that I really admired. I really admired Ted and what he's done there and really created something that's different. It has its own verve. It has its own voice. It sort of has its own way of operating that's different than anything that I'd experienced. And honestly, it's a marketer's dream, because you have this really fruitful thing that hasn't had any brand work done around it. And so then you're able to really say, okay, well, why is it successful, and what are the things that really drives it? And then just kind of pour gas on those things that have made it successful. And then there's Wingo Outdoors, which is a young company that has the ability to really expand outside of the fly fishing realm. I mean, right now it's dog print, or fish prints on dog products and belts and buffs and key fobs and lanyards and things like that, and gloves. But I think the runway there is really long, and we're going to really take that in some interesting directions. So
that's cool.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that gets me from here to there in sort of as quick a time as I can.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I think there's so many things I want to dig into. I mean, going back to, Alaska and Diane, I definitely wanted to hear about that. And also just hearing about Ted and the Cheeky. I think the interesting thing there is, like you said, when everybody knows the Sims and these big companies, and everybody kind of knows a Cheeky too, but they're always kind of like, well, they're not quite there. So it's interesting that you're there, you're with this company that, obviously is a newer company, and to watch that develop is, from my perspective, because I have a little bit of that online, that marketing, skills as well. So, I love hearing the story. It's going to be fun as we move forward too, on this. But yeah, maybe we can just take it back just before we jump into some of the other things I wanted to ask about Cheeky. I want to go back to that Alaska thing, because you said, I think, how many days total were you there in Alaska?
Oh, how many days? Well, so, I was there 3 years, and it was my summer job.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah,
Gotcha.
so I would go up in the summer. So I was at University of Alaska studying, studying beat poets and whatnot. And then I would go to Alaska. And I mean, this is, I think what some folks, especially maybe younger listeners, I mean, I can't even express how remote it felt then, because you would fly into this camp on the New Shigak, and I was at main camp mostly. We had 2 camps at the time, and there wasn't any cell there. You weren't calling anyone there.
No.
There was no coverage there. This was, I don't even know. I don't think I owned a cell phone at that point. It was kind of pre-cell phone. There was no internet. This was all generator. We didn't even have long range radios. We had a short range radio, so you wouldn't hear from anyone until the plane flew in.
Yep.
And when they were, within 20 miles or something, you'd pick them up on the shortwave radio, and then, you'd run down and, grab some restock. And, here I was, really barely an adult. And, I was given a shotgun and a jet sled and hundreds of miles of wilderness to explore and fish in. And it was really just kind of,
Wow.
Fed right into to that, just kind of that adventuresome gene that I guess I have. And, I still remember at the time, like getting there and like, just seeing. One of the things I love about guiding, and I've talked to a lot of folks about, what do you miss about guiding? I miss the people, right? I loved having those interpersonal connections. I think fly fishing, and maybe fishing in general, it's the great equalizer, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much money you make. You can buy your way into a great place to fish, but you can't buy your way into a fish, right? You have to do that thing. And it means that even if you have a tough time rubbing 2 pennies together, right? Like, you are, you're in an even playing field with the billionaires of the world. And I love
Yeah.
things that are the great equalizer.
Cool.
I guess I'm an egalitarian in heart.
Did you, when you went up there, so the first time you drove up to Alaska with your parents' car, did you drive up alone, and was that just to explore, or did you actually have a job?
I didn't have a job. So that was, I'd worked, worked in high school. I got I turned 16 and wanted to drive up, and my folks, said, make this money. I made that money. I said, you can use the family. We had a van. We called it the van.
What kind of van? Just so we can paint that picture. What was this van?
Oh, it was a Dodge Ram van. It
Yeah.
had 3 bunk seats and was purple with a silver stripe in the middle. And it had dark back windows. It was sort of funny because when we would drive it to school, I had 2 brothers, older and younger. And so when I was younger and my brother would, allow me to ride with him to school instead of taking the bus, like there were a couple times we would drive by the school and the school would get phone calls like there's someone here to abduct kids.
Nice.
But it had a big sliding door on it. And so, for this trip, I was, my mom's like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to drive up by yourself? And I was like, yeah, I guess I will. And she wasn't completely crazy. She was working, like I said, as a teacher, and she had a young teacher at school and talked to him about coming with me. And it's so funny because in my mind, he was like 40 years old.
Yeah.
But it turns out he was 22.
Oh, wow.
So
And you were like 16?
I was 16. Yeah.
Wow.
So we went up and had just an amazing time and, caught salmon and, we camped the whole way, obviously. And we did a big backpacking trip in Denali. And, what's really great about that park, in fact, I wish they would do it for all parks, is that you had to get on a park bus to go through.
Yeah.
And, then you would get out, and we were doing this hike where we went up the Tolklat River and then we crossed a glacier and came down another drainage. And we were about 6 days into our trip and we were walking upriver and the wind was in our face. And, we had bear bells on, but we were kind of in this alder thicket, and we came around the corner of this alder thicket, and about 50 yards away were 2 small cubs, like really
cool.
teeny tiny cubs, and about 50 yards on the other side of the cubs was a mama grizzly who proceeded on running full speed at us and charging me and this guy. And they train you. You have these things called BARFs, bear resistant food containers. You put on your food in, and then they say, here are the stages. Don't look them in the eye, back up. And so we were doing that. Whoa, grizzly bear, throwing our arms in the air, and like moving together. And she bluff charged us 4 times, and every time she was pushing us back, and then she would run up and push the cubs away. And so she would just kind of get close. And on the last charge, we were actually standing in the river, which was really cold. We could see the glacier was coming out of, and the bear came down and was kind of doing a big curve, a big circle. But when it hit the edge of the water, so much water exploded from its paws that the guy I was with, he went down into the prone position in the water.
Wow.
It started floating because it was within 10 feet of us. It was really, really close. And so he went down, and he later said that was the scariest part of the whole thing, because he didn't know if he was going to come up and the bear was going to be on him, or it was going to drug me off, or what would have happened. Anyway, and it had just it took its cubs up and over the hills, and made the next few nights really pretty Barry and Harry. So
there you go. Did you tell your mom that story when you got
later?
That?
Later, and boy, she's retold that thing 100 times at least, probably 1,000 times.
I know. Isn't that amazing? I've had a few bear encounters up in Alaska, and it's like, out of all the stuff, the fishing, you go up there for all that, and there are some good stories there, but it's those stories, those bear stories, and all the other ones that you kind of tell, don't you? Yeah. At the end of the day,
I think there's very few times as humans, and I think we're feeling it right now, where we really feel vulnerable, right? We really feel that we're, out of
Yeah.
that we've sort of lost control of our own life, of staying alive. I think that's all an illusion, honestly. And I think
Hmm.
we've kind of learned that through this pandemic, that, our safety is a psychological illusion we put up. And
Yeah.
I think that, at least for me, I've always kind of been, fairly introspective, but I think this has really hit it home. And I've always been about, don't put off the fun you can have today, because at the end of our life, all we really have are,
Exactly.
are these memories that we make. Like, who cares about all this stuff?
Yeah, I
All
know.
this, you want to be, there's, and even security, financial security, we all know is a little bit of a myth. So,
Yep. I
don't want to
agree.
get too
No,
philosophical
no,
here.
I agree. I think it is kind of, especially in this country, in the U.S., things are kind of crazy. I just kind of, to get off the subject a little bit, it's funny. We just last night did a little exercise. We tracked down my last name, Stewart. I never knew on my father's side where it went. And we kind
Uh-huh.
of did that thing online, whatever, through the whole genealogy and stuff. And we tracked it back to literally like a king in Scotland, right? So the Stuart Shield. And
Right.
it's just this really interesting. But as you look, those are all people like in 20 generations along the way of my family. And these people that some of them only lived to be 20 years old, some of them. And it's just amazing to think, like, put us there, right? We're not that different. I mean, things are different, but we're still, we're just living I mean,
Right.
why are we here? Like you said, why are we on this planet? And for you, I think, for some of these things, having a purpose, and that's what fits in
Yeah.
with these companies, right? If you give the company a purpose and their why, that helps them think more than just the money, which is obviously way more important.
Abs- Absolutely. As we were sort of having some preliminary discussions, and even really before I joined the team, that was sort of one thing that Ted is just a really incredible businessman, and he's got a
Oh,
really,
cool.
he's got great knowledge of so many different things. He's really well educated. And I said, look, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm gonna bring a real sense of purpose to this work, because if all we're doing is, if the whole purpose is just to sell more reels, I'm
Yeah.
not interested,
No,
right?
no,
And no one else will be either.
no.
I said, we have to really determine, like, who we are, what are those voices, that we're representing out there, and what are we trying to accomplish? And, going through those exercises as a team and as a growing team. I mean, boy, we've hired, 5 people in pretty quick
Oh, wow.
succession.
Yeah.
So that's really fun.
What is your like? How many people are on the? Well, let's think of this. When you started, so you said about a year ago. I
Yeah,
mean, how many people are on there now?
I was the fourth hire, and they had just hired the third, quickly before I was there, and we're now, I think, 10
Oh,
people.
wow. Yeah, yeah. So
So
you're
it's
like double.
really growing. Yeah, I mean, the pandemic has, the one great sort of offshoot of everything is that people have discovered the outdoors again, and they've discovered fly fishing. So,
Yeah.
we've been really successful, and we're scaling for that growth, and that's really fun.
Well, Peter, I wanted to jump into, obviously we got a bunch on Cheeky we could dig into. I wanted to just talk, and this will probably bring us into that. But, as far as choosing a reel, this is something, I mean, we've talked a lot about on here about choosing a fly rod, choosing a line, but the reels seem to be that one thing where it's like, well, just get a reel. It doesn't really matter what it
Right,
is, you know what I mean? But
right,
I know it does matter. So I wanted to touch. So let's just think of somebody, if somebody's kind of new, maybe they're
sure.
thinking of buying their first kind of nice reel and they don't know where to start. Can you just break down what they need to know to purchase a reel?
I mean, absolutely. I think that you're right. Sometimes the reel is sort of the overlooked, piece of equipment, as is fly line. I think those are the two that, they're not as sexy. Certainly Cheeky has tried to make them sexy. I mean, we
That's
were sort
right.
of the first to come out with those bright,
The
bold colors.
colorful. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody was like, "Oh God,
Yeah.
the traditionalists and some of the traditional companies, right, were just very entrenched in black and
That's right.
maybe gunmetal. But now, if you look through, you'll see everyone's has got color, and the more color, the better. And I think that Ted should be really proud, and we're really proud at Cheeky that we really started that revolution. But that doesn't answer your question. So if someone came to me and said, "Well, what fly reel do I want?" Right? The first thing that I would ask is, well, what's going to be your primary rod, and what rod are you matching it to, and what are you primarily going to be fishing for, and how much do you think you're going to fish, right?
Let's take this, Peter, just for an example. We're kind of in a dry fly season, so let's just think of
Sure.
it as a dry fly. Let's just think in the rod exactly. You could have a bunch of different rays, right? The 9-foot 5-weight, but let's just say it's let's say it's a 10-foot 3-weight. That's the rod, and
10-foot 3-weight.
yeah,
Wow.
10-foot 3.
Okay.
And I only say that because I was talking to Joe from Thomas and Thomas recently.
Oh yeah,
I'll
sure.
put a link to the show notes to that. And I was asking him, we were talking the same thing, and he mentioned, I think either the or 10-foot 4-weight, one of those in that range. But
Sure.
again, I was kind of thinking, well, it's not your standard 9-foot 5-weight, I guess
No.
is the standard. But he was going, no, would you choose a reel differently on whether it's a 10-foot 3-weight versus a 9-foot 5-weight?
Well, yes, I would. If it's kind of a switch spay style, or even a single-handed rod, those longer links. Sometimes, you're getting specialty lines that are a little bit longer. Or if you're talking about something like a spay or a switch rod, it really depends if you're going to be using a line, if you're going to be using like a Scandi or maybe even a traditional spay line, it's going to take a lot of space on a reel. So you probably
right.
want to one up your reel size from from kind of the typical thing that you'd be getting for a 4-weight, right? So, so Limitless is our top of the end reel, right? So instead of getting a 325, maybe you get a 375 for a 4-weight, which would typically be for a 5 to 7-weight line. But once you pack all of that, all those heads in there, you just want to make sure that what you're not doing is you're not shorting yourself on backing in case you do have that big fish. As well as you want to make sure that when you reel up that line, you're not starting to bind the reel with too much line on there, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Gotcha.
So I mean, the one thing that we are really focused on at Cheeky, and a lot of companies are, is making sure that we can have a reel for every part of an angler's journey, right? So as we know, a lot of people have found fly fishing in this pandemic. In fact, I'm going to call out Diane Bristol. I was talking to her about the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
She still works at Sims, and we were just kind of hitting around like, yeah, there's got to be a name for this new person. And she's like, I'm like, yeah, this pandemic angler. She goes, the Pangler.
Oh, the Pangler.
So I'm now using the Pangler. She coined the phrase. I am commandeering it. So this Pangler, what they're looking for is like, how can you demystify this sport for me that seems so complex? And so something like the Preload, which is it's a $99 reel. It comes with backing, fly line, and a leader already on it, right? Great entry point. It's a really great drag system to it. It's a real value there. And that's a lot of what Cheeky wants to do, is it wants to bring, I kind of say we want to Robin Hood this stuff. I was about to use the curse word.
That's right.
we want to Robin Hood this. Like we want to bring.
By the way, Peter, you could go ahead and cuss on this one. I do
Okay.
I do bleep them out sometimes, so don't worry about it. So, but yeah,
Okay.
feel free to just talk naturally.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, it's I should not be cursing anyway. I'll have to put $1 in the swear jar here.
Right.
Anyway, so we want to bring more value than you're paying for, right? So for Limitless, this has really got the drag system, the sealed drag system, and just the large arbor and the lightweight that you would find in a $600, $700, $800 reel, and we're offering to our customers at half the price, right? So we want to sort of give you the high end that maybe you'd be, spending $1,000 at someone else for about half that. And so we have, so you've got this preload reel, and then we have the Tyro, which is the next step, and the launch reel, which is, just beautiful and has a very silky drag system, and then the Limitless. So we have, we hope we can walk the angler through their journey. And one of the things, when I came to Cheeky, that we really sort of discussed, like, who are our people, right? Like, who do we really identify with? And one of the things we did in an exercise is we identified that we're probably a younger crowd. We're probably a little bit irreverent, right? We don't really buy into the whole traditionalist idea of fly fishing and the elitist. Like, we hate the elitism of it. We also realized that we're probably not the all-inclusive lodge people, right? We're more of the DIYer, right? Yeah. So we're more the people that, drives our Toyota truck to the riverside and sleep in the back so that we can be first on the river. And we really want to work that puzzle out. And so, as a company, we're in this next year, we're really focusing on what can we bring to the table for this angler, this new angler, this learning angler, as well as the more experienced person, on how they can do it themselves, how they can learn to get on the water, as well as, the all important thing of like river etiquette, right? That's something that's cropped up a lot. You've seen Angling Trade articles about it. And I think that there's a validation there. I don't, or a value there to teaching this. How do you coexist with other anglers on the river, whether it be in boat or wade fishing, and what's proper etiquette, what's proper fish handling is a big one. Are we loving our rivers to death? I think I saw that somewhere, and we want to make sure that as an industry we're helping people down the angler's journey in the right way.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. OPST's rods represent decades of dedication to sustained anchor two-handed casting. A rod reflects its designer, and these rods are a true illustration of Skagit master Ed Ward's vision. The Pure Skagit series falls right in line with OPST's principles, a short, medium, fast-action rod that sports an extra sensitive tip, all while maintaining a powerful lower section that's true and sure to leave you impressed by its feather launching potential. And I've been using this rod for steelhead lately and been blown away by its lightweight and the power it packs. You almost don't realize it's in your hand. It's like it's ultralight. So that was, thinking about how to describe this thing. I think that's the word that comes back to me. I was casting some big flies for steelhead with a sink tip and a bunch of wind, and I didn't have a problem at all, even with my less than perfect casting technique. So I've been impressed with the 11-foot 7-weight, but there is a huge line. They have 3 different rods in the lineup, from 6 to 9 weights, and from 10-foot 8-inch all the way up to 12-foot 3-inch, which pretty much, for me, covers it all. So I'm excited to dig into more of this. These rods actually diverge from the Micro series in a few ways. The upper grips are double weld and thus aligned for the contemporary two-handed rods, while the lower handle still remains switch style. These rods are also slightly faster than the Micro series, being a true medium fast action that utilizes the upper third of the rod. Targeted towards fishing large trout and up to Canadian and Alaskan king salmon, this series should cover all of the bases when targeting those larger fish. Head over to wetflyswing.com/OPST to check out the lineup right now. That's wetflyswing.com/OPST. Sawyer offers a full line of modern and traditional products for oarsmen, canoeists, kayakers, surfers, and paddlers of all genres, providing unsurpassed function, performance, and beauty. They design and handcraft every product in the USA, ensuring everything they make is from the highest quality materials with careful attention to detail. They take pride in their employees' stewardship of the environment and our country. In return, you have the assurance of knowing the product you receive from them is genuine, made in America, and cannot be replicated. I've been using Sawyer products for a long time now, which is why I'm definitely excited to share them with you on the podcast here. I've been down some crazy technical whitewater and mini fishing adventures that put me in places that were where I had to make a good move. And I love the design, the power, the performance, and always knowing that I can count on that stroke, even when you need to make, that one to get past the rock or whatever. You can always count on Sawyer for that. And you can count on them as well. Sawyer products are designed by paddlers, oarsmen, and surfers alike to fully meet your performance needs. Pick up one today and experience the feel of water. Head over to wetflyswing.com/Sawyer to grab your set today. That's Sawyer, SAWYER, wetflyswing.com/Sawyer to get started. Okay, back to the show. And I want to go back to, again, you mentioned the reel. So the preload is kind of your intro. It's got the backing, the fly line, everything good to go.
Yes.
And so on that one, let's just take it. Let's just say 9-foot 5-weight, just to make it easy. So you got somebody brand new. They're probably going to grab a 9-foot 5-weight or something similar to that. So what would be? Is there a real model, or is there only one?
Yes. Yeah. So the preload 350 would be the one for them to hop on. It would have the line that's perfect for them. It's all set up and ready to go.
What line is that's on there?
Well, we make our own line.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. So this is a line, and we make it just for the preload. It's floating, weight forward. It's I would say, sort of the fly line trick is that it's probably a little bit heavier in the front. A lot of it because we're focusing on, okay, the person that gets this preload, they're going to really need to be able to load about 20 foot of line, right? Like, and being a guide, I kind of chuckle a little bit, so especially in Montana, I mean, it's pretty interesting that people would come out and really struggle to cast 20 feet. But I would say it was a rarity that people could cast over 30, which is really, I mean, some people are like, what do you mean 30 feet? I'm like, I told people, if you can get 15 feet out of, the end of your rod, and I'll help you get there. We can catch 80% of the fish on this river if you get a good drift. And if my bug selection is right.
Yep.
So this is, when we think of something like the preload, we're really thinking about what's something that's going to be really buoyant with some great weight forward, so that it really helps them, when they're first learning to cast, have that weight, that weight early on, because we're not expecting people to cast, to cast all the line here. I will say I took this to Pyramid Lake recently. I took this line and it's great. I mean, I could cast the whole line, and, I wouldn't call myself an expert caster, although I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But it was, it fished really, really well, and the buoyancy of it's awesome.
So that's the preload. So basically, that's the intro. And then, so if somebody, let's take it to the next step. So somebody, like you're saying, we're walking through the customer journey. So they've already bought your preload, or maybe they hadn't, but they're kind of at that next level, right? They're like, maybe they do some steelhead fishing or something like that. What would be, so is the Limitless the next? And talk about the features on like the difference between the Limitless and your other one.
Gotcha. So, the preload has, what we call the S power drag system. It's kind of stacked alternating discs. So it's a disc drag, but it's not sealed. So like for a $99 reel, great drag system. So then you go to the Tyra that has a very similar drag system, which is kind of one step up from the preload. In fact, they're very, very similar. We do the Tyro in what we call the triple play, which is a fly reel and spool bundle. So you get the fly reel and 2 spools. So you can kind of have those as you're on your sort of fisherman's journey. And we do this in the launch as well, which is the next one up I'll talk about in a second. But, I just love these bundles. Fish Pond makes us a great little bag for them. And as you're progressing on your journey, probably once you get to the point, Dave, where you and I are, I mean, I've got a stack of rods that never see the light of day. It's really sad, and lots of reels with, different lines on each one of them. But, back in the day, I mean, I was always carrying extra spools because I would say, do I want to be fishing streamers with a sink tip or a full tip or an eye line? Once you get into intermediates, right, there's a lot of subtlety involved there. And with the way that lines have gotten more and more and more kind of specified, it's nice to be able to have a couple other ones there with you without having to buy 3 or 4 reels.
Yep.
So that bundles, I think, is a really good way to go, and because that's kind of your next step, right? You're like, I got my 4 weight or my 5 weight,
That's right.
my standard fishing rod. Like, what's next? And you're like, well, I've always wanted to fish for pike, or I know that there's carp, one of my personal favorite freshwater fish. I know that there's carp in my area, or I'm going to go striped bass fishing, or and then you're like, okay, well, now I've got the bug. I'm obsessed by this. I can't wait till my next time to get out fishing, and I'm starting to really understand my home waters. I'm getting more specific with it. Maybe upped my game from an entry level rod to a, mid or upper level rod. And I want to match that with a lighter reel. So we developed the launch last year as this great, it's not a fully sealed drag system, but it's a waterproof drag system. It's one you can use in the salt. You always want to rinse everything after you fish in the salt. And really, actually, anytime you fish, especially lines, they go south quickly if you don't clean them. But anyway, so that launch is ultra light. It's got a very smooth startup inertia to the drag, which is going 0 to drag. That's when a lot of fish are broken off. Where it's like zzz, pop, right? Because that startup inertia to your drag isn't smooth. There's, some sort of sticking point at the beginning. So with our drag systems, especially on launch and limitless, that startup inertia is just very, very smooth. And it's light with the large arbor. So it balances really well with all of these, very, very highly engineered rods. I mean, honestly, and Thomas & Thomas is a perfect example of just a beautiful, highly engineered rod. But you talk about Loomis or Orbis or Scott, you can't find a bad fly rod out there, if you ask me. There's so many, compared to 30 years ago where, there was some junk on the market. We've come so far that, a $250 rod today would be cast very close, honestly, to $1,000 rod. But
gotcha. Okay, so you're mentioning, so we got the launch, and was there a fourth reel in the line?
Yeah, so the limitless, right? So that's
kind
of our so fully sealed drag system. This one goes up to a size reel that'll fish,
big stuff,
12, 13, 14 weight line. So this is the one you get, when you're at the pinnacle and you want to have that pinnacle product, or you're chasing a pinnacle fish, like, you're flats fishing for the first time and you just don't want you don't want to have to worry about your reel failing, right? Because this is where the failure is going to happen, right? It's rarely going to happen when you're catching that 12-inch trout, unless you've mishandled your reel and not laid it in the mud or left it in the salt or something. But once you get to something like a tarpon or you just can't risk it.
You gotta have that. You gotta have that.
So that's how we sort of think about, helping our angler get through their whole lifespan as an angler.
That's it. So that walks through it. And I just want to circle back on that. So we talked about some features, and if we could just think maybe the, kind of a top 5, top 10 features sort of thing. You mentioned a few, we had, the lighter reel, reel for salt, a sealed drag, startup inertia, the larger arbor. Are there other things to think about that add to that more, when you compare the limitless to, say, a preload or any high-end reel to, are there any features we're missing there?
Yeah, I would say for a higher end reel, you're going to want something that's fully machined. That's a high grade aluminum. Aluminum's, that this is kind of that aircraft aluminum. An integrated reel foot, so something that's actually part of the overall reel. Once you get to a larger reel or a more expensive reel is something that you'd probably want to look at. And that's, I can remember one of my favorite reels way back in the day. It didn't have an integrated a foot to it, and I was constantly. I mean, I lost that reel off of my rod so many times because the screw and like I
Oh,
didn't put
what
Loctite on it.
what
And it
is
was
the
just
integrated? What's the integrated foot?
oh, so yeah, so it's integrated. It's just built into the reel rather than an add-on piece that's screwed on.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean that large arbor. I mean that was another thing that we were sort of an early adopter of. Something that so when you're reeling, you're just picking up more line, and especially when you're fishing something like tarpon or bonefish or permit, the
Yeah.
big three of flat fishing or flats fishing, or I would also say for striped bass or arapaima. I can tell you what I mean. So I'm very, very fortunate to have worked with IndyFly and be on the board there. And, one of the sort of crowning fish in a lot of ways was catching a giant arapaima in Guyana. And the thing about those fish is that they're really kind of slow and subtle. They actually suck their prey back into the back of their mouth. They don't really have teeth. They have a crushing palate. So they suck it way back in there and they crush it. And it's such a hard hook set because they'll actually, bend the hook flat so that it's kind of lying horizontally, and it's really hard to get the fly to get purchased in their mouth. And the big ones come right at the boat because they are the apex predator. They're like, what the hell's this thing? And so they just come straight at the boat, and you have to be able to pick up that line as it comes in, or even as you're stripping in, right? You're trying to catch up to it and get a good hook set, and then you've got this line around your feet. And you want to get that out of there as quickly as possible when they do finally make that their big runs. They're a really interesting fish because they jump like tarpon, right? So they jump, open their mouth, and like, I mean, I just still have dreams of big arapaima just jumping and shaking their mouth and just seeing my fly tumble out of there.
That's it. And that's where the large arbor comes in. Whether you're doing that
Exactly.
or even we have a lot of listeners here that are steelhead fishermen.
Oh
and
yeah,
same
right.
thing would be. So basically, any of those reels, the Limitless, the Launch,
Yeah.
or even the Tyro or Tyro would probably be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Limitless and Launch are kind of, they'd be, yeah, or Tyro,
Yeah.
for sure. And like I said, like if you're for spay fishing, spay line, steelhead swinging, I would always kind of one up my
Yeah.
size just to give myself a little bit more room, especially, those Skagits. And I'm not an expert. I've, some great friends who help me limp along with them and and more or
Yeah.
less tell me the lines to buy because I can be pretty
Oh yeah.
complex. But this whole kind of Skagit, I don't want
Yep.
to call it craze.
Yeah.
But it's such a game changer, right?
Oh yeah.
Like here I am, someone who, maybe goes once a year for a couple days,
Mhm.
in a good year, maybe a week, and that I can get out there and really, really have the ability to make just really, really long casts where, back when I was first learning. In fact, I'm sort of looking at, an old GLX that's like a 14-foot rod. And like, I can remember trying to cast that thing with 100-foot,
Oh yeah.
110-foot belly line and just struggling and catching myself in the back of the head. And now to go out there and just be able to,
Yeah.
and just, it's nice.
It brought it all to the basically, yeah, anybody can do it now. Although it's interesting because we've had a number of guests on here that have talked about steelhead and the fact that
Sure.
you catch a ton of fish right in the ankle deep water. The
Yeah.
fish are just sitting in there. And so it's pretty cool. But yeah, well, I think we're doing pretty good here. I mean, one thing I want to check on as far as a resource.
Sure.
So if somebody, obviously we always direct people to a local fly shop if they can get there, but if they can't get there, where would you send somebody? Is there something online where somebody could find out like, okay, I've got this rod, I want to match it with this reel or vice versa?
Well, so at Cheeky Fishing, we have a reel selector, and basically it's a pretty clever tool. You can go in there, and it's kind of got a little map of various fishing waters, And so you sort of click on, we really sort of wanted to make it again, kind of demystify it. So it's like, well, where are you fishing? Small stream, click here, flats fishing, click here, open ocean, click here, lakes, ponds, rivers, and everything in between. So that's a really good way to select, pairing that with a reel. We basically have made, especially Launch and Limitless, with a lot of, we're very cognizant of the weight, because you really want that rod to balance correctly, right? And if you put your reel on with the line and you put your finger right at the end of the cork, if it's completely centered and balanced there, you've got a very balanced rod.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, because rods are getting lighter and lighter and lighter. I mean, I can remember, when my buddies at Orvis said, "Hey, we've got this new line of rod coming out," and they sent me, and this was the H2, and they sent me one of those, and I remember getting it and being like, "Oh, they forgot to put the rod in the tube," because it was so light. I could not believe that there was an actual fly rod in the tube, and sure enough, there was. But that's been a real innovation that's come about in the last decade or so. It's just that those rods are getting so light, and so we have to match that up with reels, which just means taking chunks out of the reel and yet keeping them very, very sturdy, right? So it's definitely a highly engineered product development. Ted's our product guy, and he's developed all of the reels that we have, and he painstakingly goes through renditions.
What's Ted? Just give us a brief little, because I haven't talked about Ted. I don't know the background. What is his background in fly fishing? Just a quick little summary there.
So Ted is, it was really interesting, right? So he's fly fished his whole life. And he started Cheeky in college with three of his college buddies. So the four of them started it. He tells this great story about how, he would have to ride his bike before he was going to class over a bridge to drop reels off to be shipped, right? So,
Nice.
And they all they modeled it a lot after the ski industry. They were all big skiers, and they said, why doesn't fishing manufacturing feel more like skiing manufacturing, right? Because this is when, those small ski companies were really starting to become prominent. And so they really looked at that. They all love to ski. They all love to fish. And they said, we were going to build a different type of company that's a little edgier, that is into inclusion and, is into these bright colors and kind of has a verve to it. And so he did that. He went to MIT, right? So he's a smart guy. Which he'll always tell you. I mean, he tells me this all the time. It's like that doesn't make a smart person.
No,
right?
But it is a barrier to entry for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, he's got kind of some of that, some resources of that book knowledge that, look, I don't have, right? Like, I've never taken a business course in my life.
Yeah.
And so we're a really good foil where he has, he's also great at finance and whatnot. And I'm kind of a dreamer, right? I'm a big picture guy. I'm working towards a utopia, as hard as that is to actually, really envision of ever getting there. And I think, like anything, it's about the journey. And if you're making decisions pointing towards a utopia or sort of the way the world should be, then you're doing your part to move it there. And so I think that, that's kind of something that I try to instill in the folks that I work with and the companies that I work with as well. And one of the things that Cheeky does, and it's a little bit off topic, but one of the things that always attracted me to the company was the Schoolie tournament, which is the largest fly fishing tournament in the world, right? By far. And so this is happening every year.
How do you spell that?
At Schoolie, so like SCHOOLIE.
Oh, okay.
And the great thing about it, Dave, is it's a one-day tournament. It's a low barrier to entry. Like, It's cheap to get in, right? Like I know what it costs to go down and fish a Florida one. It's unguided, no boats. So it's two fishermen and a team. You have to have your feet on the ground. It's all catch and release. We worked with Keep Fish Wet to come up with the best measuring and handling protocols, so which we enforce. And so it's catch, photo, and release. And it's on Cape Cod, so the entire Cape Cod. It's May 22nd. In fact, we are in the wait list part of registration. Registration has been going on 2 weeks, and we have close to 500 people who have registered for the event, which is just amazing, if you ask me. And part of that is because, if you win some great prizes. All the proceeds go to striped bass conservation with Stripers Forever, Keep Fish Wet, and the AGSA, which is the American Saltwater Guide, ASGA, American Saltwater Guide Association, who does a lot of great, policy projects when it comes to striped bass and recreation. Anyway, I just love this thing. I love events. At Sims, I was part of the team that put on the Ice Out Guide event, which grew to be the largest guide event in the world with about 900 people coming into Bozeman. And we just had these great things like, the Shootout, which was a video award. We had great speaker. It was just really awesome. And you just see when people get together, and I know we're all really craving getting together right now. And so last year, we delayed the event from May. We typically do it the Saturday before Memorial Day. And they do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of the unofficial kickoff to striped bass season. Two, you don't have to have beach permits then. So you have to buy these permits to park. And one thing that I just love about the Cape is that if you access legally, you can walk as far up and down the bank as your feet will take you. And it's very similar to the stream access policies currently in Montana. And I just think that those sort of abilities to do that really gets my juices flowing of being able to explore. I always want to be on the right side of the law. I hate skirting the rules. And I also believe that, our public waterways and our public lands are there, should be easy to access. There should be no barriers.
How does that work in Montana when you're there? If you're in the stream, what if there's a cabin, right on the bank, literally there?
Doesn't matter.
So you can be fishing right in front of their cabin.
Right in front of their cabin, as long as you're below a high water mark. 100-year high water mark. And there's actually a little bit of verbiage in the law where, if there's something that's impeding you that's dangerous, right? You can walk around it. A lot of people don't know that.
I love that. Do you know? I know that's not the case in every state. How many states have laws like that? It must be very few, right?
It's very few, and they're in jeopardy. They're even in jeopardy here
really?
We have. Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, because of this last election, we have some folks that are real private property nuts, and are probably, it's expected that they'll try to challenge it. It's something that, if challenged in Montana, people come out of the woodwork, right? Because it makes no difference what political party you're from. If you're a fisherman or a hunter, and you utilize public land, like you're going to fight for that right, because for a lot of us, it's maybe the most important thing outside of our family. I mean, I hate to say that, but for me, I can't imagine not fishing. I mean, I can't imagine it. It would be devastating, or not having a place to fish. So that access is so important, and we're really lucky to have the ability to access these wild places. So, there's places like Wyoming where the stream bed is owned by the landowner, but if you float over top of it, you're okay. There's places like Colorado where you can't even do that. And, I'm hopeful there's a movement the other way, but it seems like, more and more places are in jeopardy.
Before, as we take it out of here, I just wanted to go back, because I love to kind of summarize these things. But so if somebody's in it for, say, let's go back to that dry fly rod, just a basic rod, they could pretty much just grab almost any reel as long as it balances, right? Because you don't need a seal drag, you don't need a super lightweight reel necessarily, and so that'd be the recommendation. But let's say they're going for saltwater, then there's a bunch of things they need to get, or even bigger fish. I mean, if you talked about bigger fish, let's just say steelhead, for example, you basically need a larger arbor would be nice. I guess a lot of the big features would be helpful, right? Even for steelhead.
Absolutely. I mean, I think because of they're all disc drags, right? And they're that any of them would do the job. For me, I mean, it's also like, steelhead is such a mythical creature. I'm not, like I said, I'm not much. I've caught steelhead. Certainly, I'm a novice at best, steelhead fishing. I had the great pleasure, two of my good friends are Dave McCoy, who's a great steelhead fisherman, and Tom Larimer, who's, obviously a great steelhead fisherman. And I'll tell this quick story because I think it's hilarious, because here I am with two legendary guys, and we are on the Skagit a couple years ago, right when it opened up, and it'd been closed for 10 years and whatnot. We met. They actually picked me up at the Seattle airport with a drift boat in tow on a Friday afternoon. It was freaking packed, and here they come rolling through the drift boat. It's hilarious. And so we went up there and fished for a couple days, and we were fishing one run. We had actually, so here we go. We've all longtime guides. I mean, there was 60 years of guide experience in this boat, and I wouldn't even say any of us are old men, but we get to the put-in and we float down to the first run. We get out and we realize we hadn't brought a drop of water or an ounce of food.
Oh, wow.
All we had was a few beers, and we were all really, really thirsty. And at one point I was just like, I'm just going to drink the water. They're like, don't do it, Pete. Don't do it. So they had to talk me off the cliff, but we're about, we're maybe third run down of our day. And, I'm kind of between these awesome fishermen, and this gets back to they're in ankle deep water, these incredible casters, and I'm, slopping my stuff out there, and they're pinging the far bank. And I was lucky enough that I hooked one right in front of me.
Oh, nice.
And so, they come over, and that's the thing that I really just love about, kind of steelhead fishing or any fishing, right? Like when someone else catches a fish, I am more than happy to reel up my stuff and come over and help out and be part of it. It's just such an incredible experience. And this was a pretty incredible fish. And we, I got it in, and I could, like, the hairs on Tom's neck are standing up as I'm telling the story. So Tom goes to tail it, and he grabs the tail. He's got the tail, and he fumbles it, right?
Oh.
Here's a guy that's got thousands of steelhead under his belt, and he fumbles it. He goes to grab it. He knocks the line, and of course, where this goes, and the fly comes out of the mouth, and the fish swims away, and he's just he turns to me with this just white. He's just mortified that he just did that, and it is absolutely the best result because I don't need another fish pick. Yeah, it's a quick release for the fish. It's great on the fish.
Yeah.
And the best part about this, I have this story to tell about him for the rest of my life. I couldn't ask for anything better. But we go over and we sit, we're sitting on the bank just kind of doing the sort of post-fish, chit chat. And I look over and there's a tear running down Dave McCoy's face. And Dave's a really emotional guy. He's just a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
Huge on conservation. And I'm like, dude, are you okay? And he's like, this is a really special fish. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to fish for these fish again, right? Because it had been closed. And he's like, this gives me hope. And I think that, for so many reasons right now, I think that we really all need a little bit of hope that the Earth's going to help clean this thing up.
Yeah, so. I think it is. It's just going to take time. I wanted to highlight Tom because that was, I've had Tom and Dave on different episodes, and
Yeah.
and they both just produce awesome, shows. And
Oh, of
Dave
course.
at IFTD, before the COVID hit, I met Dave for the first time at IFTD a couple years ago, and yeah, he was, out of everybody I met, there was only a few people that I really made a crazy connection with, and he was one of those guys. Like, he sat around for an extra time, we just chatted. But so yeah, I appreciate Dave for sure. But I wanted to go back to the beer. So you guys have no water. You've got, how many beers are on the boat when you start off?
18 pack of
Oh, you
crappy
got
beer.
plenty. You got
We
plenty
got
of
plenty.
beer. Okay, I was gonna
There's
say,
some
because if it was
nutrients in
two, that'd have been a different deal. So you got 18, so you guys could drink beer all, or at least split them up, and you're not gonna
Oh,
die from thirst.
it was a, we may have, tipped a few back the night before. I think we were all a little bleary eyed in the morning.
Yeah.
I still vividly, we get down there and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, nothing to eat.
That's
No
classic.
water, not a water bottle. It was pretty
good.
funny.
I love that. That's so classic. There's no water or food, but there's an 18 pack of beer.
That's right.
Perfect. Perfect.
Typical, right?
Cool. Peter, well, I think there's a bunch of stuff, like always, we leave on the table here, but I think we gave people a good idea of, what Cheeky's about, and some tips, at least on choosing. I think, like we were saying earlier, you could probably go online, check that out, or go into a local fly shop.
Or go into your local fly shop, or email or call us.
Yeah.
I mean, we sort of stress that in this day and age, we want to be very, very connected to anyone who's interested in the sport. So we'd be happy to talk you through that. We get messages, Dave, all the time on things that really, I don't know why they're reaching out to us. Like, I'm going to the White River in Arkansas. What flies should I throw?
Perfect.
And it's sort of an interest, those sort of questions are interesting. Like, wow, like, you're asking us, and that's a real privilege.
Yeah.
And so we really, really value our customer. We're going to go the extra mile. If we don't know something, like even something like that, if we don't know that, we can find out, right? Yeah. We're plugged into a network of great guides and, in fly shops around the country. But yeah, going into your local fly shop is a great way to get a high level of service. If you have any other questions, or if you just prefer to, right now it can be tough to go into places, give us a call or shoot us an email. We'd be happy to answer any and all questions. And Dave, one of the focuses we have for the next, 6 months to a year is creating some content to answer those questions, whether they be blog posts or videos or whatnot. Everything from how to select a reel, like we just talked about, to how to set your drag, right? Like, I think that some of those very, rudimentary, or what we would think would be rudimentary, either they may not be known by someone new to the sport, or we may have been doing, so many times, like, I find out things that I've been doing wrong for 30 years. And, I feel like a bonehead, but I'm happy for the information to do it right.
Let's hit on that really quick, Peter, because I don't want to miss it. Just quickly on, I'm not sure if you know, but, the best way to set your drag. That is a good question. How do you, you got a reel, how do you set your drag?
Well, so everyone is always like, oh, I'm going to set my reel to the fish I'm catching, right?
Yeah.
No, you set your reel to the tippet you're using, right? So number one thing, you want to make sure, that your fish comes into the equation, but you want to make sure that there's no backspool, right? So don't loosen it up enough. That what backspooling is when you can test for this. You pull your line off, and you want to make sure that the reel doesn't overspin and chew your line back in, because that's how you get tangles when it's running out of your rod, right? So big long rip, make sure that that's good. Always set it lighter. You can always tighten later, right?
Yeah.
But try to match that to your tippet. So if you're using very light tippet, you want to be very light on that. And if you have a fish that's going to take a tremendous run, like a steelhead, or a bonefish is a perfect example, right? So you may say, oh, I need to stop that run. No. Right? The more line that's out there, the more friction there's going to be on the water, the lighter the lighter your drag should be. So you want to match it to the tippet. If you're expecting a long run, like even with trout, if you're like, okay, well, I'm fishing tricos, for big monster trout here on the Bitterroot or something, you want to make sure you have a really light drag because you're using 6X, 5X, 6X tippet, but you're going to be catching a big fish and it's going to run. You're going to have a lot of line in the water, and you want to make sure that you're not putting undue pressure to test your knots.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And for the trout, I think if you take it back to, again, that person fishing for trout, maybe small trout, they just pull out. Once you have your reel, pull it out until it won't overspin on you, right? So it's obviously tight enough so it won't do that. Once you get there, then you can kind of slowly adjust it, as you need, but start out lighter than tighter, which is a great point.
Exactly. When you're fishing for bigger fish or for heavier tippet, right?
Yeah.
So let's say that you're like, boy, I'm out here, I'm tarpon fishing, and it's also, you want to always play the fish in as quickly as you possibly can, right? To not overwork the fish, to not put it in danger. So for something like tarpon, you do want to squinch down your reel a little bit more for a number of reasons. One, they are going to make big runs and have a lot of line out, but you're going to be using heavier line, right? Yeah. Maybe 30, 35 pound breaking strength on a lot of those. Some people run straight 50 or even more so they can lean on those fish, but they run so fast and they're such an incredible fighting fish that you want to immediately have some pressure on them, as much pressure as you possibly can. Yep. And if you have too little, your spool will be just going so crazy that you're 100 yards deep in your backing before you can even work on turning your drag knob. So
that's right. Cool. All right, Peter. Well, I guess like always, I could talk to you for another hour or two here, but I'll let you get out of here. So it's just cheekyflyfishing.com if anybody has questions for you.
Yeah, cheekyfishing.com. We didn't talk about Wingo, but wingooutdoors.com for some cool fish prints and whatnot. Another great brand to check out that you'll be seeing a lot more of in the future as that brand grows.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll put links to Wingo and everything else in the show notes. So. Cool, Peter. Well, thanks for taking the time today. This has been a lot of fun. I have a good perspective on Cheeky, and I think if I'll keep in touch with you as you guys go, and look forward to seeing your progression.
Thanks, Dave. It was a pleasure to be on here, and I can't wait till we're all out fishing again here soon.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes, all links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/199. So we are 1 week away from 200, magical 200 episodes, and I've got a good one to share for you next week. So if you're brand new, you haven't subscribed to the show yet, just click the subscribe button in whatever app you're on, and that next episode, which is going to be a big one, is going to be shared out to you directly. I want to remind you, the Gorge Fly Shop is our local fly shop, and you can support this podcast by supporting the Gorge. Just click any link or go to wetflyswing.com/gorge. That's GORGE. And anything you purchase there, this podcast will get a small commission at no extra charge to you. I want to thank you in advance if you've already purchased from the Gorge. So that's a wrap. That's all we have for you today. I want to thank you again for stopping by today. I hope to maybe connect with you online or maybe see you on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.